Okay, so in the last lecture, we were looking at the issues in concurrency control, and we established a notation for representing the interleaved operations of a bunch of transactions. We call them as schedule, and then we looked at various kinds of schedules, and then defined what is called a serializable schedule, and in particular what are called conflict serializable schedules. And conflict serializable schedules are actually desirable schedules because they are in some sense equivalent to a serial schedule. And then we looked at how do we achieve a conflict serializable schedule in practice if you are using lock based concurrency control. So a very important concept in this context was this two-phase locking protocol, and if we are using two-phase locking protocol, it can be guaranteed that a bunch of transactions that are following this protocol will be such that the interleaved operations of all these transactions will indeed be a conflict serializable schedule, and so the concurrency can thus be controlled to our desirable needs. Okay. Now, in this lecture, beginning this lecture, we will focus on how do we handle system failures of various kinds, transaction errors, and then the concurrency control module might sometimes decide that a particular transaction is not proceeding as per the requirements. So, it might actually abort a transaction, and there could be disk crashes and power failures and all that. So, in the face of all these things, remember that we have a commitment in the transaction system that we have something called atomicity and durability. Atomicity means we should ensure that all the operations of the transactions transaction are done in their entirety. Okay, and durability means that if the transaction is completed, and how exactly it declares that it is completed, we will see as we proceed in this lecture. So, if the transaction is admitted as completed, then whatever the changes that it has done should be permanently recorded in the database. So, there is our durability requirement. So, now the error recovery module is what is in charge for this particular tasks, and let us see how exactly this is done. So, the principal tool for achieving all these is what is called a log. A log is basically a sequential file. Log is a sequential file where new log entries are actually appended to the end of the file. So, you have a sequence of log entries, and we keep on appending these log entries to the end of the file, and then some part of the file will actually be in the memory, some part of the file will be on the disk, and the log entries are made first in the memory, but they reach the log on the disk in the same order in which they are written in the memory. So, that one important assumption we will make. And so, we will examine various kinds of these logs, which are actually called undo logs, redo logs, and also called undo redo log. And in all these contexts, we will study how exactly error recovery can be achieved. Okay, so let us proceed with first giving you an idea about what are these log entries that are there. So, recall that here is our architecture of the RDBMS system. So, we have this part of the thing was all done in the early part of the course. Now, we are actually focusing on the back end, where transaction manager, buffer manager, recovery manager, they are all there interacting with the disk, the data on the disk, and the data on the disk is, there is data, there is metadata, and there is a log, right. So, it is this, the log is actually maintained here in stable storage. So, we will see exactly how. So, the data, the database data which is available in blocks reaches the buffer and is made available to the RDBMS runtime system, which is actually running all these transactions, etc. So, there is a transaction, the transaction manager is the one that is actually watching all the schedules and then will enforce the concurrency control. Okay. So, the recovery manager is the one that is watching for errors to happen, and I mean if errors happen, what to do, right. So, recovery manager is the first subsystem of the RDBMS entire RDBMS system that gets the control of the whole system when the system is restarted after some error or a crash has occurred. Okay. So, this is the first system that gets hold of the system, and then it restores the database system to a consistent state and then starts admitting transactions to be performed. Okay. So, recovery manager is the one that gets the first control of the whole system. Okay. So, now let us look at so, in our discussion in this set of lectures, we will assume that the DB item is actually a disk block. Okay. So, this also affects as to what is the lockable item. So, we will also assume that the lockable item, minimum thing that you will lock is actually a disk block. So, notice that this is actually a lot of data, because a disk block will contain a lot of data. So, if you are locking that, unless you release a lock on that, nobody else will be able to access that, right. So, but so we will, there are larger issues to be, there are other issues to be considered when we have even smaller units than a disk block that are lockable. But in an introductory set of lectures, it's difficult to go into all those details. So, we will make a simpler assumption here that we have a DB item which is a disk block, and disk blocks are locked if necessary. So, they are brought into the memory buffers and they are modified by these running transactions, and then they are going to be returned to the disk when the transaction completes. So, here in this particular lectures, when we are discussing the specific recovery methods, we will see exactly when transactions, when these disk blocks reach the disk. Okay. When the when the blocks in the memory buffers actually reach the disk, we will see that exactly. So, in order to model and understand these intricacies, let us introduce a little bit more detailed transaction operations. So, let me call this input A is an operation where a disk block with A, item A, whatever we are trying to actually modify, is brought into the buffer space, memory buffers. Then read AT, T is a local variable, that is a variable of the transaction program. So, let us assume that there is an operation called read AT, where the T, the local variable, is assigned the value A, whatever is there on the in the database disk, database block. So, if you issue a read AT, then in case the block that contains A is not there in the memory buffers, then an input A will be required to be done, that will be automatically done. Let us assume that. Okay. So, input A will be done if you simply issue a read AT, then if A is not there in the pages that are there in the memory buffer, then input A will be done. When you do an input A, that particular disk block that contains this item A will be brought into the memory buffers. In a similar way, we will say write AT. So, basically what this says is that whatever the change, so all the changes by the transaction are happening on the local variables. The memory the variables of the program, okay, the program variables. So when we say write AT, that what we mean to say is that now the memory buffer item A can now be updated with the value of T. The T has been changed by the transaction. So, and in case this is actually not there, you may have to do an input A again. In case this item is not available in the memory buffers, we will have to do an input A. And then finally, we have output A, that means send the block that contains this item A to the disk. This is a very crucial operation. This is where exactly data is actually reaching the disk, and we will have to watch these output operations carefully. Okay. Okay. So with this a little bit more detailed model, let's now try to understand what exactly happens when we do logging and when we use various recovery procedures. Okay. So here are the log record entries. Okay. In this slide, I will give you log entries that are common to all the recovery procedures. There are a few. There is one important log entry that is specific to a particular logging method, and we will examine that as we consider those methods. So start T. So T is some transaction ID. So start of T is a log entry that says that a so and so transaction has begun its operations, and NT is the so and so transaction has ended its operation. Commit T. T has successfully completed its work, and changes made by the T must appear on the disk. That's what commit T means, right? So this is also a log entry now. It will be a specific log entry. Abort T. So T has not successfully completed its work, and whatever the changes done by T should not be present in the database on the disk, right? So this is the that's our intended meaning for abort T, but abort T is basically a log entry now. And then there are what are called update records. So these update records basically are made while the transaction is actually updating the variables. Okay. So I will show you exactly what those these are specific to the particular logging method that we are using, and so we will exactly see them as we look at the specific methods. And then finally, there is something called flush log. What this says is that, remember, the log also is a file, and so it also has blocks, and some of the blocks of the log, the last part of the log, are there in the memory buffers. Okay, but then it's important for us to ensure that this log is permanently available on the disk. So okay, so at some crucial points we will actually force write all the log entries to the disk. So that means we will transfer these log blocks that are there in the memory buffers to the stable storage, the secondary storage. Okay, so that operation is what is called flush log. So we will use all these operations and illustrate how exactly logging, error recovery works. So let me first take you to one of the logging methods that we will use, that can be used. It's called undo logging. Okay, the name of the logging method is undo logging. So from the name, it's kind of clear as to what we are going to. The principal thing that this particular method does is undoing. That means if some transaction, okay, has not completed its work, whatever it has done will be undone. So that's the basic thing. We'll see how exactly we do that. Okay. So now we can talk about all the log entries that are there. So all those log entries that I have shown, begin T and end, start T, end T, commit T, abort T, all those things are there. In addition, there is what is called an update type log record. That update type log record under this undo logging method will be like this. There is a transaction ID, and X is the database item, and V is its old value. V is its old value. So we make a note about the old value. Transaction T has changed the item X and its old value is V. So that's the meaning of this update log record. Okay. Now with this we have a bunch of rules for actually doing the undo logging. So the undo logging rules, the two of them. So if a transaction T at any point of time modifies the DB item X, then the log record TXV, okay, must be returned to the disk before the new value of X is returned to the disk. This is the principle that we will have to. So this who enforces this? It is the concurrency, the recovery module concurrency control, the transaction processing modules have to ensure this thing. Okay. So okay. So this is called undo logging rule U1. So what it basically says is that keep this log entry, ensure that the log entry is written to the disk before you change the item on the disk, change the actual database of on the disk. Okay. So this transaction, this entries, log entries will be first made in the memory buffers, right? And so, but suppose you have come to a stage where you can actually start updating the database on the disk. So before you do an update on the database, you must ensure that all these log entries have actually reached the disk. Okay. So that's what this U1 means. Now, so this is about commit. If a transaction T commits, okay, transaction T has requested for a commit, then what we do is the commit log record must be written to the disk only after all the DB items that have been changed by this particular transaction have already been written to the disk. Okay. First ensure that all the changes that are done by this transaction to the database items have all been written to the disk before you say that, before you actually write this commit T log record onto the disk. Okay. Okay. So, but after you do all those changes, then soon thereafter you can write this log record. Okay. Now actually it's very crucial that the log record of this particular transaction actually reaches the disk, because when a crash occurs, what the error recovery module will see is only the log, and from that log it will try to figure out what exactly has happened just before the crash. So if the commit T log record is actually there on the disk, then it knows that this particular transaction actually has committed, otherwise it will treat it as incomplete transaction. Okay. Okay, so is this principles clear now? The undo logging method, the update log record will maintain old values, and there are two rules here, that before you actually transfer the disk block that contains the modified value of X to the disk, you ensure that the log record is written to the disk. Okay, and also before you agree for the commit of this particular transaction, ensure that all the DB items have been actually written to the disk. Okay, so that's what these two rules mean. So as you can see here, committed transactions are actually perfectly safe, because you have already written whatever the work that has been done by a committed transaction to the disk, and only then you have written this commit T log record to the disk. Okay. Okay, so let me. So in some sense, when a transaction T commits, the database items it changes would flow to the disk like this, right? for each modified DB item, the update entry TXV is sent to the disk, and then the write item will be done, and then commit T will be done. After all these things have been, the commit T will be written. So let us now take a concrete example and then look at the actual sequence of operations, and then also kind of look very carefully as to what should be done if a crash occurs at what point of time in the sequence of operations. Okay. So for this, let me take a running example where we have a money transfer happening of some 100 rupees from A's account to the B's account. So the consistency requirement that we have is A plus B should be same before and after the transaction is over. Okay. So that is our consistency requirement. If both of them together have, in this case, so here is a big table, so watch it carefully. So on the disk, on the disk A has 500 bucks, so B has 1500 bucks, and we are transferring 100 bucks from this fellow to that fellow. So ultimately this fellow will have 400 bucks and that fellow will have 1600 bucks. The sum of these two things will remain as 2000 at the beginning and at the end of the transaction. Okay. Now actually the transaction operations are happening here. So you can see this is the transaction. So M is a memory variable, M is a transaction variable, local variable. So it is reading A into M is being reduced by 100, and then it is writing A to M, and then reading B from M, reading B into the same variable M, and then incrementing M by 100 and writing it as B, and then it is doing a flush log and then outputting A, outputting B into the disk. Okay. So and then finally, then actually after, so remember the undo logging principle requires you to ensure that the log entries, so as it is doing, log entries will be made. We will see exactly how those log entries are done. So all these log entries are actually happening. So before it does any changes to the data on the disk through this output A, output B, output A, remember, is the only place where actually the block reaches to the disk. Alright. So before it does this, it does a flush log to ensure that all these log entries reach the disk. Okay. And then it changes these disk items and then does a commit T. That is the protocol for committing. So if a transaction commits, what it should do is it should write this commit T record to the disk, but before that it must do the changes to the database items and ensure that they are done in the disk. Okay. That is the protocol, that is the U2 we talked about, U1, U2, right. U1 said before you do the changes, ensure that the log entries reach the disk, and U2 said before you before you do a commit, ensure that the changes done by the transaction are actually written to the disk. Okay. So now let us look at the a little bit detail actually what are the log entries that made. So at step 1, before you start this, I am obviously just focusing on one transaction, but in general there will be multiple transactions running, but let us just focus on one transaction for us to understand how exactly recovery should happen. So the step 1, we just recording that transaction T has started and it has read. So you say read AM, so obviously it will cause an input to happen. So whatever it is there in the disk will come to the memory buffers. So this mem A, mem B are memory buffers, disk A or disk B are disk on the database on the disk. It is the database on the disk, right. So disk A, disk B are database blocks on the disk. So they will be brought to the memory, and now M equals M minus 100. So this change happens in memory. So it becomes 400, and then you say write. So this 400 will be returned to this memory buffers, the disk page on the memory, on the in the memory. Notice that the disk database has not changed yet. Now at this stage, since the transaction has changed this item A, DB item A, we now make a log entry saying that transaction has changed this DB item A and its old value is 500. We make a log entry now saying that the transaction T has changed this A and its old value is 500. The new value we are not bothered about. The new value is there in the memory right now. Okay. Now, then the similar kind of things will happen with B. So we read B. So that will cause this disk page containing B to be brought to the memory buffer, okay, and made available, and then it will be assigned to the same variable M and all that. So M is now updated. So this becomes 1600 and this continues to be 1500, right? And then the transaction says write B to M, write B using M. So now this one, the buffer actually will be changed to 1600. So the moment that happens, we make a log entry again saying that the transaction T has changed this DB item B and its old value is 1500. Okay. Now the transaction actually has more or less done its work in memory. It has done its work. So it's now ready to update the database on the disk. But in the undo logging principle, before we do any changes to the database items on the disk, we must ensure that the log entries are reached to the disk. So we do a flush log. So if we do a flush log, so we know that these are the entries done on behalf of this transaction and appended to the log buffers. So all these, along with this, of course, there are some other items that might be there done on behalf of some other transactions also. All of them now will reach the disk, the log file on the disk. Now we do an output A. So this output A, so that means this mem A will now be transferred to disk A, and then we'll do output B. So this 1600 will be transferred to disk B, and then the transaction says commit. So we make a commit log entry, and as soon as we do a commit log entry, it's in our interest to ensure that commit T log record actually reaches the disk. So we do a flush log again to ensure that this commit T actually is gone to the disk. Okay. So this is how we do undo logging based work. Transaction work will be done like this. Of course, I am ignoring locking and all that because that's a separate concern. So before you do all these things, you should have acquired locks and all those things, right? So that is the constraint from the conflict serializability point of view. Acquiring locks, releasing locks, and all those things. We have temporarily kept that aside. We are just looking at recovery only in this thing. Okay. Now is that clear as to what we are doing? Now let me take the same example and illustrate exactly what happens when a crash occurs and what are the various possibilities that we will see when a crash occurs. Okay. Now let's see. So after a crash occurs or some system failure occurs, recovery module gets the control. So what it does is to examine the log. It will examine the log. That is the only thing that is available to it. Everything in the memory got wiped out. So then by looking at the log, it will partition the transactions into two sets. One is called committed set the transactions for which the committee log record exists on the log. Okay. And the incomplete set, the transactions for which the start of the transaction exists, but either abortee exists or committee does not exist. So, we know the transaction has started, but committee does not exist. So, we treat it as an incomplete transaction, and suppose abortee exists, then we treat it as incomplete transaction. It is possible the transaction itself decided to abort, right. So, in which case it will make an abortee log entry. So, in either case we will treat that as an incomplete transaction. So, a set of all incomplete transactions IDs and the set of completed or committed transaction IDs we will formulate by looking at the log. The log is on the disk, and so we will assume that the disk has not crashed, the system has crashed, okay, the disk has not crashed. So, in the worst case of disk crashing, we should ensure that the log file actually is available to us safely. So, that is another level of precautions that we have to take. So, while writing the disk onto the file, we probably should make multiple copies so that they are not actually in a geographically same position, things like that. They are probably two different disks and things like that. So, we should ensure that a copy of the disk, a copy of the log is always available to us, along with of course the copy of the database. Okay. Now we will examine the log in the reverse direction. Why in the reverse direction? Because basically we are doing undoing. So, if we are undoing, work of some bunch of transactions has been already done. So, we are undoing. So, we should proceed in the reverse direction. Because remember, the log is a sequential file. So, changes made by all transactions are available in sequential order, in a time sequential order. So, we must undo them in the reverse direction. Okay. So, for each of, so we will start seeing these update log records. So, for every update log record that we see, we will see whether the transaction T is committed or not. If the transaction is committed, that means committee log record is actually there on the thing. So, we actually have to do anything about it, do nothing about that transaction, because all is well. Why? We had U2 there, about the undo logging principle 2, U2, which said that you make all the changes to the database and only then write commit T. So, okay. So, if we have already found a commit T record and classified this transaction as a committed transaction, then we are very sure that it has actually updated the database and then made everything as per requirements. So, we don't need to do anything about committed transactions. Now, suppose T is incomplete, then what we should do is restore the value of X on the disk as this V. Remember what are these V's? These are these old values. So, what is the case here? If the transaction is incomplete, then how will it be possible? The commit T log record is not there. So, it is possible that the transaction actually has finished all its work and started writing its changes onto the disk, and some of the changes might have reached the disk, some of the changes might not have reached the disk. We do not know exactly what happened, we will never know exactly what happened. But fortunately for us, because of our principle saying that if before you update anything on the disk, write the log entries to the disk, then the log entries which contain the old values are available to us. Okay. So, using these old values, we will basically restore the database. We will assume that the transaction has actually changed the items, and we will simply restore them to their old values, because we do not know how many of them it has changed, how many of them it has not changed. Okay. So, and we do not know the new values. We really do not know the new values. New values were existing in the memory buffers and they all vanished. Okay. So we don't know the new values, we know the old values. So we will restore the value of x on the disk as this old value b. Okay. And all these old values are available to us because the log entries have reached the disk. And then for each of these t transactions, we will do an abort t log entry and then and do a flush log, so that we know that the transaction has been successfully aborted. Okay. And yeah, so once we complete all that, we can actually then resume our operations of admitting new transactions to start coming into the picture. Okay. So we at the end of this, we will be sure that the database is restored to a consistent state, and so we will start admitting new transactions to come into the picture. Notice one thing, that while you are recovering, the system again might fail. A system might fail while you are recovering also. But fortunately for us, these recovery methods are idempotent. That means you can actually do the same thing again with the same effect. So if in case you have done some part of this, doesn't matter, you come up and then again do this division of committed transactions and incomplete transactions and carry out this entire process of course we made I am glossing over many finer points about here, in the sense that we are actually examining the whole log till to the beginning of the log entries. Okay. It's also possible to kind of introduce what are called some checkpoints on the logs, and then ensure that you don't do too much work while recovering. You go to the last checkpoint or something like that. So that those logs are called, additional features will be there. They are called checkpointed logs. We are not considering checkpointed logs here. We are considering some simple logs, okay, not logs. Okay. Now let us look at the same example and then let us see exactly. So there it is the same thing as we have seen in the previous slide, but I just made this flush log entries red. So that, so let's say, let's consider the cases like crash occurs sometime before the first flush log. Before the first flush log, which is this, sometime somewhere here the crash occurs, and so when we recover, we don't see anything about this transaction T. Okay. But fortunately, nothing on the disk has changed because the crash occurred before the first log. So the output A is actually happening after this flush logs, right? So if somewhere here the crash has occurred, the database on the disk is basically not changed at all. It's 500, 1500 will continue to be there as they are. So T has actually been recognized as incomplete, and we are not very sure whether the log entries of T have reached the disk or not, because the crash occurred somewhere here even before the flush log. So these things might have reached the disk because some other transaction was actually doing a flush log, and so these things might have reached the disk. In case these things have reached the disk, we can make use of them and simply restore the old values anyway. See, if you write back 1500 on 1500, nothing happens, right? So we can always write that. So the old value need not be changed actually here because nothing actually happened on the disk. But in any case, we will simply restore the old values using this log entries in case the log entries are available. Okay. So you ensure, of course, that T is resubmitted because this work has to happen, this transfer has to happen. So So you enter abort T and then let the T. Now let us assume the I am changing the slide. Say these slides are so alike to each other, so I have to tell you when I am changing the slide looks like. So I have changed the slide. Okay. So this is the first case we have considered. I have now changed the slide. So crash occurs sometime after the flush log, after the first flush log, but before step 11. What is step 11? Step 11 is commit T. So unfortunately, commit T record has not reached the disk. Okay, this is a really, from a transaction point of view, this is a really unfortunate situation because it has finished all its work and in fact has even successfully updated the, we don't know about that actually, whether it is updated the database on the disk or not, we really don't know. Okay. Okay. But if it has actually, if the crash has just occurred after step 10, then it has probably changed the disk also, but we are, it's really unlucky for the transaction is concerned because we don't see the commit T log record on the log, and so we will treat this transaction T as incomplete. We will treat the transaction T as incomplete, and of course log entries of T are there on the disk because it has the crash has occurred after the first flush log but before the step 11. So we will anyway, whether these changes have actually happened on the disk or not, we are going to restore the old values and then resubmit the transaction T. Okay. So that's how we will do. Now let me change the slide again. Crash occurs after step 11, just after the step 11. So again there are two cases here. After step 11, that means from the transaction point of view, it has asked for commit T because it has actually changed the disk and so it has asked for commit T. If it will be lucky if it has commit T record actually has reached the disk, okay, then it will be recognized as a transaction that has actually completed and nothing will be done. But if it is, if this commit T record has actually not reached the disk for some reason, then we will again treat the transaction with T as incomplete transaction and then use these log entries to undo the operations of the transaction and then get it resubmitted. But if the commit T record is on the disk, then the T is recognized as completed and no action will be taken. Okay. So you can see now only you can actually appreciate as to when a transaction has actually committed. Okay. So it all depends on the kind of logging method that we are using and how the log entries are made and when the log entries reach the disk. All these issues are connected. So if the log entry commit T has reached the disk, it's then the transaction is treated as committed. And it, of course, from a system point of view, this is the safest thing. We need to ensure that the database is consistent, right? So we cannot take any risks about these things. So we put in very strict rules saying that unless this commit T record is actually reached the disk, we can't treat this transaction as committed, and we will simply undo its operations with the help of log entries. Good. So these are the various cases. So we have considered the cases as to where the crash occurs before this, between this, after this, etc. So I hope it's all clear now as to how to use undo logging. Crash occurs after step 12. That means flush log is commit T is already there. So commit T is on the disk and the T is recognized as completed. No action will be done. For other, as far as this transaction is concerned, no action will be done. There will be of course other transactions for which we will have to do some undoing. And undoing always happens. Remember, the undoing happens in the reverse direction log. So this is the forward direction of the log. We will start examining the update record in the reverse direction of the log and then start doing undoing. Okay, so that is undo logging. So basically, in summary, what undo logging does is to cancel the effects of all the incomplete transactions and basically does nothing about committed transactions because nothing needs to be done about committed transactions. So it ignores the committed transactions. Now, but one major issue about using undo logging is that all these DB items that the transaction has changed, okay, have to be sent to the disk, have to be sent to the disk before the transaction can make this login committing. So obviously, if I have a transaction, I have finished all my work, so I want to do a commit. So whatever I will be requesting that, okay, send this page to the disk, send this page to the disk, etc. Or when I make a commit T, the transactions manager has to ensure that all the disk blocks that I have changed are actually written to the disk before it allows me to do a commit. So a lot of IO happens at the commit time. So this can be called as forced writing. Okay, in some sense, all these disk blocks have to be written by force to the disk. As against this, there is another method which does exactly the reverse of this method. It's called redo logging. What it does is to ignore the incomplete transactions and repeat the work of all the committed transactions. Okay, and it uses a different update log entry where it will store, instead of old values, it will store the new values. Okay. If you start storing the new values instead of the old values in the update log entries, then it's possible for us to redo some of the work of a committed transaction. Okay, so that's how redo logging works. So I think we'll stop here. I will talk about redo logging in the next lecture. Okay, and then finally we will close with we have another method called both undoing and redoing can be adopted as principles for a recovery method. We will discuss that also. Okay, thank you.